Welcome back to the podcast where we pull back the curtain on royal headlines and look at what's really going on behind the palace walls. I'm your host, and today we're tackling a fresh wave of commentary that lumps together two very different branches of the royal family, the Yorks and the Sussexes. Some columnists are now painting them both as equal threats to the monarchy, but is that a fair comparison? Or is this just another case of scapegoating? Let's break it down. Over the past week, Sarah Ferguson, better known as Fergie, has found herself back in the headlines. Old emails surfaced, showing her continued communication with Jeffrey Epstein, even after she promised to cut ties. That revelation reignited questions about whether the York family, Fergie and Prince Andrew in particular, should finally be cast out of royal circles for good. Now, according to insiders, Prince William himself has been pushing for Andrew and Fergie to be cut off completely, even evicted from Royal Lodge, where they've been living for years. That was the narrative, until the story suddenly shifted. Instead of focusing solely on the Yorks, certain royal watchers began drawing a parallel between the Yorks and the Sussexes. Here's where things get interesting. Sarah Vine of the wrote a piece suggesting that Meghan Markle and Sarah Ferguson are essentially the same kind of problem for the monarchy. Her reasoning, Fergie wrote to Epstein, a convicted sex offender, while Meghan simply spoke openly about her experiences with racism and mistreatment. Yes, you heard that right. Somehow those two actions were placed side by side as if they carried equal weight. As if that weren't enough, Lee Cohen, another staunch royalist commentator, took it further in a GB News column. He argued that both the Yorks and the Sussexes are corrosive forces weakening the monarchy's standing in modern Britain. According to him, the monarchy is under siege from two directions: the Yorks with their scandals, and the Sussexes with their supposed intentional sabotage. Now, let's take a step back. Cohen's argument hinges on one thing: public opinion. He cited a recent YouGov poll showing that support for the monarchy among young people, those aged 18 to 24, has collapsed. Only 30% of them now say they want to keep the monarchy, while more than a third would rather have an elected head of state. Compare that to 10 years ago, when support among youth was over 70%. That's a staggering drop. But Cohen's conclusion: he claims it's the fault of both the Yorks and the Sussexes. The Yorks, in his words, blunder through scandals. The Sussexes, on the other hand, deliberately weaponize their royal past through interviews, documentaries, books, and media projects. He paints Harry and Meghan as attention seekers who've harmed the institution for profit and revenge. Let's unpack this. First, the York situation is fairly straightforward. Andrew's ties to Epstein are deeply damaging, and Fergie's lack of judgment only fuels that fire. Charities have distanced themselves, and their continued presence under the royal umbrella undermines the palace's credibility. That's undeniable. But comparing that to the Sussexes, that's where the logic falls apart. Harry and Meghan stepped down from royal duties years ago. They live thousands of miles away in California. They've told their side of the story. Yes, sometimes bluntly, and yes, in high-profile formats. But to say they're deliberately trying to destroy the monarchy, that assumes bad faith, when in reality they were responding to years of hostility, mistreatment, and negative press fed directly from within the palace machine. It's also worth remembering the pattern here. Back in 2019, when Prince Andrew's links to Epstein first hit the headlines, what happened? Suddenly there was a flurry of negative Sussex stories. Every damaging revelation about Andrew seemed to come with a counter-story about Meghan and Harry, conveniently distracting the press and public. Fast forward to today, and we're seeing the same playbook again. The truth is, the monarchy's declining popularity has less to do with the Sussexes' Netflix series or Harry's memoir, and more to do with the institution itself failing to adapt. Young people don't look at Buckingham Palace and see transparency, inclusivity, or modern relevance. They see privilege, outdated traditions, and too often hypocrisy. Blaming Harry and Meghan for that is not just lazy, it's dishonest. So where does this leave King Charles and Prince William? Cohen's prescription is drastic: cut ties completely, revoke titles, scrub names off official websites, and exclude both the Yorks and the Sussexes from all royal functions. Essentially, a public purge in the name of self-preservation. But let's not forget, the Sussexes already made their exit. They're not hanging around waiting for a ceremonial sword to drop. They've built their own life. If anyone's clinging to the past, It's the commentators who keep dragging them back into every scandal. Meanwhile, the Yorks remain tied to the monarchy, and their issues remain unresolved. That's the real weak spot. And if William is indeed pushing this behind the scenes, then drawing the Sussexes back into the fray could be a strategic move. Deflect from Andrew and Fergie by saying, well, look at Harry and Meghan, they're just as bad. To me, this latest narrative says more about the monarchy's defenders than it does about the Sussexes. The institution is struggling to define its purpose in the 21st century, and instead of genuine reform, it keeps reaching for scapegoats. What do you think? Is this just another smear campaign against the Sussexes? Or do you see real parallels between the Yorks and the Montecito couple? That's it for today's. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. We'll be back soon with more stories from behind palace gates.